Thank you for joining us today. My name is Alexa Simmons, and I'm the Assistant General Manager at the Mechanical Contractors Association of Ottawa. Today, we are the proud sponsor of the Leading and Managing the Two Are Different and You Need to Do Both session. Your speaker for today is Scott Morin, Certified EOS Implementer. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, so thank you for attending. This is my third symposium. I've had the good fortune of being able to present in the past. I think the first time I did one on getting the right people in the right seats, and that'll be a recurring theme through the leadership discussion. Last year we did scorecarding. There'll be some scorecarding discussion today. But today is about leading and managing your people, and there is a difference, and you need to do both. So I'll get into the presentation here. Just a quick backgrounder on myself. I spent about 25 years out there, not in the construction industry. I was a high-tech sales exec, sales manager, VP of sales, and then I was a CEO of a company here in town. And after about 25 years of doing that, I did what most older executives do when they find themselves without a home. I got into consulting, go-to-market advisory and whatnot. And I was helping a manufacturing organization here in town. They were running a system called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And I sat through what is known as a Level 10 meeting. And that was about 7 or 8 years ago. And when I sat through the Level 10 meeting, I immediately became smitten just with the fact that it was a very execution-oriented meeting. Asked the CEO what that was. He told me about EOS. And so for the last 6 or 7 years, I've been doing what's called EOS implementation, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. That's not the focus of today's talk, but I can't help but speak to some of the tenets of this system as we kind of go through the presentation. And so I'll just familiarize you with them very quickly. The philosophy with the Entrepreneurial Operating System is that no matter what business you're in, your business really runs on 6 key components. And those 6 key components need to be healthy in order for you to be able to execute and scale your business well. So the 6 key components are vision. So vision is where you're going as an organization, how you're going to get there. We'll get into a little bit of discussion on that because leadership is a lot about vision. There's people. You want to have the right people within your organization that are sitting in the right seats. Data, so you want to run your business on metrics and have the right numbers at your fingertips that tell you whether or not your business is on track or whether there's a storm coming. Issues, so that's just the idea that you want to be able to document and prioritize the problems, the opportunities that are in front of you, and execute really at the root of any problem or opportunity that gets to you, because fundamentally any blocker, any problem that you're facing as an organization, more often than not is a symptom, and we got to get to the root cause. Then we've got process, just the idea if you want to grow your business, you're going to want to systemize the business, you're going to want to document the repeatable things that occur within your organization and get everyone following that process. And then ultimately traction, which is just the idea that you want to create a culture of execution and accountability within your business. And to the extent that you can get these things firing on all cylinders or pretty darn close, a lot of problems have a tendency to go away. You're still going to have issues, you're still going to have challenges, but you'll have a language or a framework for dealing with those. So that's my EOS primer. I'll get into some of the concepts today. But the purpose of the talk today is just the idea that when you're a leader, when you get promoted into a leadership position, a managerial position, a position with direct reports, more often than not, you get there by being able to execute really well. So you're really good at doing your job, see problem, kill problem. Some sort of vacuum emerges above you, and you go and fill that vacuum. So like that is what happens to most leaders today. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to speak to just the fact that intentional leadership and intentional management is something that isn't really taught to our folks that are coming up the line. And I just thought this was an interesting picture. I was just going through some old files. This is me a little over 20 years ago. I've been elevated into a leadership position, And in this picture, you might note that I kind of look like a deer with the headlights on, right? I kind of was in over my head. I didn't really know what I was doing. The language you see behind me there is Serbian. So I was in Serbia. I was leading a sales call in Serbia. And so I was in that position myself. So the first 5 or 6 years of leadership for me consisted of, I got elevated to a sales management position because I was really good at closing deals. And what happens? You get into that sales management position, and then you just don't realize that you've got to develop your people to close those deals for you, right? So that's just one thing I want to share with you. The other thing that I wanted to share with you, sort of an inspiration for this talk, is there's a lot of bougie articles out there that speak to the fact that leadership trumps management. And the reality is both are important. And I want to make sure that we touch on the importance of leadership, but then also the importance of management, how they're different. And we'll get into that in the presentation today. So the objectives, I just want to get you thinking, right? So get you thinking about the importance of leadership and management, help you understand the difference between the two and that they're both important, and get you thinking about what intentional leadership and management really is. Leadership plus management equals accountability. And what you're going to see today in the presentation, it's a concept that we talk about within the EOS community, is just, we call it LMA, and that's what that means, leadership, management, accountability. LMA does not mean leave me alone, right? And so sometimes as leaders, as managers, we kind of want to be in our own little bubble, but the reality is that's not really what we should be doing. So here's some fundamental differences. Leadership is about working on the business. It's about creating clear direction, creating a vision for your people, creating an opening, creating expectations for them to be able to execute. And it's also about you thinking strategically about your business. A little bit later on, I'll probably bring up something called the clarity break. You as a leader need to take time once a week, once a month, whatever cadence makes sense for you, to spend an hour or two just thinking about the business. And this is Starbucks time, or what formerly was Starbucks time, but essentially it's time where you just sort of separate, you elevate, you look down on the business, and you think about the business. So that's what leadership is. Management is more about working in the business, expectations, communication with your people, doing, execution. And so let's talk about leadership. We're going to start with leadership, and then we're going to move into management. So leadership is something that, let me just move to the next slide here, is something that's covered in this book, Leading Matters. And this is a book actually that was written by my father, who was a former Air Force pilot. He was a fighter pilot for about, I think for about 10 years, and then he got elevated within the Air Force, ended up as the base commander of CFB Borden, and about 53, 54, retired from the military and started doing executive coaching. In the executive coaching that he did, he would be brought in by an organization every time they fired a senior executive. And he would end up becoming their coach. And the challenge that senior executives have when they get fired is it's often the first time that they're told that their services are not required anymore. It's a very humbling experience, but the reason why they got fired may have to do with execution, but it could also have to do with cultural fit within the organization, maybe a disagreement, so on and so forth. So what he would do is he would come in and he would work with the executive, build that executive back up, and get them ready for their next challenge, because they were leaders within potentially other businesses or other companies. So leadership defined in his book, there's lots of definitions of leadership out there, but leadership defined from my dad's perspective is that leadership is an art. It's the direct and intentional application of influence to cause achievement where otherwise it would not occur. Leadership is always based upon a vision for the future and can only be effective with those who agree to share the same values, behavior, and character foundation. That last statement is really, really important, and we're going to get into that today. The idea that you need to present a picture to your people of who you are as an organization, what your values are, and get that sort of common agreement, common consensus that these things are important, paint that picture, and then you'll be able to guide them forward. Now, there's a couple of other things that I want to share with you, and this is, again, not EOS specific, but just some leadership principles, some leadership ideas that are out there. There's a gentleman by the name of James Maxwell that's written a book, John Maxwell, sorry, and it's called The 5 Levels of Leadership. And in the book, this is a well-thumbed copy, so it's not really standing up very well. In the book, he talks about 5 levels of leadership that a leader should really go through. And this is something that occurs with our young leaders, our new leaders, that they sort of, if this light bulb can go on sooner rather than later, it's a really, really powerful thing. So the very first level is just the idea that you are a boss, that you have a title, that you have reports. So that's level 1 leadership. People follow you because they have to, right? You are their boss. But that's really just level 1. Level 2 is you're taking an active interest in your people, and you're getting to know them. You don't need to know everything about them, what they did on the weekend, but you genuinely care about their success and you want to develop them. So that's the second level of leadership, and I can tell you as a leader early on in my sales leadership career, I probably didn't get past level 1, right? So I looked at my sales reps, at my people, as the horses that I was going to ride to get my sales target done for my CEO, and I kind of looked at them as tools. I didn't take an active interest in them necessarily, maybe 1 or 2 that were easy to like, or developing them. And so what Maxwell talks about in his book is just the idea that if you want to get to level 5, you can't skip level 2. And level 2 is you're taking an active interest in your people and you want to develop them. Level 3 is this combination of situational credibility. So situational credibility occurs when you've got time in a company and you've done things for the company, you've been able to execute, you've been recognized, and then you've also helped develop some people within your organization. So level 3 leadership, again, very rare to get to for most leaders if they're going to be really intentional and self-aware with regards to their journey, is, you know, you've developed situational credibility and you've actually started developing your people. They're learning, you're delegating, they're executing. Level 4, people development. So you've actually developed a brand new, you've taken that junior estimator and now they're able to estimate on their own. You've taken that junior project manager, they're now able to PM on their own. So that's level 4. And then very few reach level 5. Level 5 is kind of the pinnacle of leadership, where just your very presence, creates this aura of people wanting to subscribe and to follow. So that's Maxwell. I wanted to share that with you. It's a great book, and there's a bunch of different little things in that book that will help you determine where you are. And the thing you got to keep in mind is you want to be, when you move from level 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, you want to be at level 2 with all your people. You want to be at level 3 with all your people, not just your favorites, right? And so that's something that I wanted to share with you. The next thing that I wanted to share with you is Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. So when you're leading your people, at the very foundation, at the very base, has to be trust. So trust is important, and the challenge with trust is people do not hand out trust. Trust has to be earned. But if you get trust with your people, that will lead to just the idea that you can have conflict within your organization, and it's good conflict. So conflict, good conflict, what that means is you're sitting down with your report, and you're trying to make a decision, or with your leadership, and you're trying to make a decision on what the right approach is for your organization. And if they're able to speak freely without fear of any recourse afterwards, then you will get the best opinion from them. You will be able to make your decision. Perhaps yours trumps theirs, but there's good conflict that occurs as you go and you make that decision. So trust is at the foundation. That leads to good conflict. If you have some good conflict, if there's some healthy debate on a decision that you need to make, then we've got commitment. Because you've met each other halfway, and from a commitment comes accountability, and accountability leads to results. Now, the inverse of this pyramid is just the idea that if you've got lack of trust within an organization or within a relationship, absence of trust, that leads to fear of conflict, which leads to lack of commitment, which leads to avoidance of accountability and inattention to results. So that's the inverse. And if you think about, if any of you guys recall Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I don't know if that was an undergrad university course or whether they taught that in high school, but the whole idea here was at the very foundation of humankind is you need food, fire, and shelter. You need your physiological needs taken care of. And then from there, you move to security. If you've got your security taken care of, you can move to love and belonging. From love and belonging moves to kind of self-esteem and then self-actualization. The point that Maslow made back in the day is if you didn't know where your next meal was coming from, you weren't necessarily worried about self-actualization, what your position is in the world, et cetera, et cetera. So same concept here. So when you're leading your people, when you're managing your people, the foundation is trust, and there's a hack for trust. Because, as we mentioned kind of earlier, people don't hand out trust on a regular basis. That trust needs to be earned. But if you as a leader, if you as a manager are vulnerable in front of your people, and if you show your human side, your not so perfect side, and you exhibit to them that you can be that way, that will speed up the trust equation and get them to be vulnerable with you as well. So that's just something for you to be aware of, vulnerability-based exercises. There's some really simple ones. When I work with a company, usually at the annual planning session, we do something called the personal histories exercise, where we just get the individual to answer, I think it's 5 or 6 questions, and everyone around the table does it. So think of this within your small team. So first one is, what is your hometown? Second one is, how many siblings do you have? Third one is, what was your worst job growing up? Fourth one is, what was your first job growing up? Fifth one is, what was the toughest thing you went through as a kid? And then the sixth is, what is one thing that no one in this room knows about you that you'd like to share? So 6 relatively benign questions. There's a couple of questions in there that you might anticipate would lead to some vulnerability-based sharing if they're buying into this process. But you'd be surprised when we go through this really simple exercise and everyone shares their worst job or their toughest experience. Sometimes there's tears. Sometimes we get into the tears on the how many siblings, right? Sometimes we get into tears on the one thing that no one in this room knows about you. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, it's 3 or 4 in terms of vulnerability, but that simple exercise, especially if you as the boss are contributing, and you should go first, by the way, when you do this experience, and don't mail it in. If you are contributing and they're buying in, the team will get tighter and tighter together over a period of time. So let's talk a little bit about culture and vision. So if you're growing your business, right? And when I take on a company for the entrepreneurial operating system, I have this talk with the team. And the talk starts a little bit like this. So you're here because you want to grow. You believe that if you're not growing, you're dying. And fundamentally, there's lots of studies that actually prove that theorem out. If you hit the ceiling as an organization and you're flat for 3, 4, or 5 years in a traditional business, there's a lot of statistics that will support that within an extended period of time after that, you're either out of business or you sell the business at a really poor valuation. And if I've got any owners in the room, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about there. But you need to grow as an organization if you want to kind of keep moving forward, and also if you want to challenge your people. And so when you're growing your organization, you want to attract people to your organization. And there's kind of 4 different types of cultures that we talk about with companies. So the very first one is low on intentionality and not so healthy. And those cultures are chaotic cultures. And the challenge associated with bringing someone onto that organization is they hear about that. They can sense that. They can feel it. They know it's chaotic. And it's very tough to attract people to that organization. Now the next one, and this is something that I was guilty of running for many years as a VP of sales within the tech startup community, is more of a command and control culture where you're high in intention, but it's not very healthy. So you've got your people, they know what the rules are, they know what the values are actually, but if anyone steps out of line, they're gone, right? And so they're not the healthiest types of cultures because people are always watching their back. And again, the word gets out on the street that that is the type of organization that you're fostering. Now, it worked for me in high tech because every 2 or 3 years we had to either raise money or sell the business. But if you're in a business that's going to be around for 10, 15, 20 years, that command and control culture will limit you in attracting the right people to your organization sometimes. Next one, happy accident. So happy accident is best way to describe it. There's a company I'm working with out of Kingston where the leadership team, they all went to US colleges. They're all D1 level golfers. And they all know and trust each other. They all came from Kingston. They kind of ran in the same circles, and they created this commercial real estate team, which is thriving right now. But the challenge associated with that is you've got these people that know and trust each other, and they're very tight and they're very close. But people that are looking to join your organization, especially people that want to join your leadership team, are going to sense that this is a little bit of a cult, right? A little bit of a clique. And they will be reticent to join your organization. So what we want to do is we want to get you to an intentional culture. So that's high in health and that's high in intentionality. And the way you do that is, from our perspective anyways, is you do that through your core values. So core values are 3 to 5 characteristics or behaviors of people within your organization that are non-negotiable. It's kind of your DNA, it's who you are. So core value work, if any of you have done it, it's highly fulfilling. If any of you haven't done it, highly recommend it. So intentional cultures, they operate with an abundance mindset. They believe in the greater good of their company. They have their people act as best recruiters. And these core values are things that if you've got a couple years of experience, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years under your belt as an organization, I guarantee you have them. You may not have put them up on the wall yet, but you have core values. You just got to flush them out. Just a quick point here, Enron's not a great example. Enron, 2 of their core values were honesty and integrity, right? So they weren't living and breathing their core values. So what we want to do with core value work, and this helps you as a leader, right? There are a small set of essential and timeless guiding principles. 3 to 7, actually 7's too many. 3 to 5 core values, less is more. They're what define your culture. They attract the right people. They repel the wrong people to your organization. And when you're hiring key people for your organization, and for a small and medium-sized organization, that's everyone, right? When you're hiring people to your organization, you need to socialize these core values with them, and you need to get them to reflect and maybe give you some examples of how they've exhibited these core values in the past, even if it's a personal example, as part of your hiring process. So core value alignment, and then ultimately you as an organization should hire, fire, review, reward, and recognize core values. So when you're doing core value work, you got to watch out for, there's 4 traps. These are 3. So you don't want to adopt a core value that's accidental. So that's the person that brought you to the dance, but not necessarily the one that's going to hire you or marry you. The example I always like to give here is back in the day, I was working with a company called Digital Equipment Corporation. One of their core values was whatever it takes. But the reality is that's a core value that kind of brought them to this critical mass. But when I was working with them, they were a 30,000, 40,000 employee company, and they were doing business with defense contractors. And so that core value of whatever it takes might imply that they're going to cut corners in a defense contracting type situation. Probably not a great core value anymore, kind of accidental. Aspirational core value, classic scenario here when we've got an owner, when we've got a CEO that passive aggressively wants to tell their people to work harder, so they make it a core value, right? Be very careful there. And then permission to play. Permission to play is a scenario where, and honesty and integrity are kind of candidates for this, although if you've got a story around honesty and integrity, then by all means, that could be a great core value. But these are table stakes type characteristics that you know, if you sensed someone didn't have honesty or integrity in the interview process, would you even hire them, right? So those are some of the value traps. The most lethal value trap, I don't know if I have a slide on this. It's the next one here. The most fatal value trap is when the leadership team, and specifically our visionary leader, do not embody these values. So we had a CEO, we were doing computer configuration for the federal government about 25, 30 years ago. We were making a lot of mistakes, we were getting a lot of RMAs. And so he put a core value up on the walls, and it had kind of a slogan. The slogan was, the difference between mediocrity and excellence is attention to detail. And he put that up on our sort of configuration warehouse wall. Meanwhile, our CEO was, classically kind of a slob, right? Like he was a very good CEO, but his shirt tail was always hanging out. And he actually did have a toupee, and it was always crooked. And so when he would lay down this core value to us, it went in one ear and out the other because he wasn't living it himself, right? Now, let me go back here for a second. Facilitating core values. I want to just sort of give you this little nugget. I want you to think about this. If you haven't done any core value work within your organization, quick show of hands. Who's done core value work here? Okay, so that's, maybe about 30, 40%. So when I facilitate core values with a company, I'll have the leadership team in, and let's say there's a critical mass of more than 15 or 20 employees. What I'll do is I'll look at them and I'll say, okay, excluding the people in this room, I'd like you to identify or name 3 people within your organization that if you could clone them, you could take over your industry. And we have some fun with that. I get everyone to write down the 3 names on their own, and I get those names up on the whiteboard. Oftentimes we'll have the same name a couple times, but then we'll have some surprise names and some out of left field names and so on and so forth. So we have some fun with that. And the very first thing that I say to the leadership team is, okay, regardless of the outcome of this exercise, I want you to informally take these people aside one-on-one later and tell them about this crazy facilitator guy that put you through this exercise, and you were one of the people that was named. So this is an opportunity to give them some good, informal, positive feedback. But as we go through the exercise, the next couple of steps look like this. Okay, what makes them great? So we've got 7 or 8 names up on the whiteboard. What is it about them that makes them great? Why did you choose them for this exercise? Inevitably, we'll have a whiteboard full of descriptors, and then we got to whittle that down to 3 to 5. We whittle it down to 3 to 5, and then we run it through the leadership team. We make sure our leadership team really displays these core values. They identify with these core values, because if there's a core value like attention to detail that 2 or 3 of our leadership team don't really embody, then that's not a core value for your organization. Doesn't necessarily mean your leadership team member is a bad person. It just means it's not a core value for your organization. And then for fun, or maybe not for fun, we run these core values by, I ask them to, I'd like you to give me the name of one of your best employees, and I'd like you to give me the name of a problem child within your organization. And we'll put those names up and we'll run them through the core value gamut, and I guarantee you the problem child will not display many, if any, of those core values in their day-to-day activities. So that's how I do it. And so if you can take that back to your organization, try and go through that exercise. It's a 2-3 hour exercise, and it's a highly beneficial one. AI is there for you later to wordsmith these things, right? Now I want to talk a little bit about core value reinforcement. This is a quote from Jocko Willink. Anyone ever heard of Jocko Willink? Anyone know who he is? So he's got a book called Extreme Ownership. And it's one of his quotes is, "It's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate." So if you're a leader and you're leading your people and you're preaching, but you're tolerating behavior and you're tolerating core value misalignment, it's going to kill you in the back room. That's his message. And so this is a really simple concept here. Within your workbooks, I just had a bunch of these extra ones lying around the office, and forgive me, not all of you have one. I think I had 47 when I left. But in your workbook, you're going to see something called the People Analyzer tool, and it's blank. But the People Analyzer tool is just a really simple approach that you can take if you're a leader, where you can actually get core value alignment going and do a subjective analysis of your people, and then ultimately anyone that's exhibiting, so plus means they exhibit that core value most of the time, minus means rarely, plus minus means some of the time. So James in this scenario does not exhibit humbly confident. It's rare that we see humbly confident. And to this particular organization, humbly confident means we know our stuff, we project that we know our stuff, but we're never arrogant, right? And so we don't see that in James often. So what we've got to do is we've got to go and address that with James. We've got to give him 3 examples, right? 3 examples of where he has not exhibited that core value. And then over a period of time, you've got to address that. Or if you're a for-profit organization, you've got to move away from James. Core value speech is another way that you can reinforce. I usually talk to my CEOs and get them to present the core value speech at least once a quarter, and they've got to be anecdotal, and they've got to give examples. And then you can reinforce core values a number of different ways. I don't know if you recognize the folks on the right here. That's the Meons from Central Precast. But, you know, I've got one company that has them on beer cans. You put them up on the walls. Very important stuff. So let's talk about how you create that vision. The Vision Traction Organizer is a one-page document where you can actually have some of your high-level vision components summarized for your people. So we've got core values, we've got core focus, we've got 10-year target, we've got our marketing strategy, and we've got our 3-year picture. So core values we've talked about, right? Get them on this one-page document. Core focus is a combination of why you exist as an organization and what your superior skill is. Like, distill that. At the leadership team level, distill that down to a couple of really simple statements. 10-year target, Jim Collins calls this your big, hairy, audacious goal. So where do you want to be 10 years from now? And it should be an aspirational statement. It could have to do with revenue. It could have to do with customers served. It could be a qualitative statement that, you know, just speaks to the fact that you want to be, you know, I have a sign company that I work with here in Ottawa where they want to be the PCL of the sign industry in Ottawa, right? And so what you're doing is you're presenting to your people an aspirational target that should be slightly out of reach, but it should inspire them. It should scare them a little bit too, but it should inspire them. So what is that 10-year target? Marketing strategy is just discussion and consensus and alignment on what your ideal best fit customer looks like. Where are they? What do they appreciate? If you were to go out and hire 3 salespeople, who are they calling? I know that in the construction business, because I work with quite a few construction companies, there's a lot of bidding that occurs, right? There's a lot of estimating. There's a lot of, you respond to tenders and whatnot. But if you could somehow move into a mode where you are in proactive mode and you're doing intentional sales and you're getting out in front of the RFP before it hits the street, who are you talking to, right? Project managers in the Ottawa area, you know, who are working for ICI type organizations, you know, let's just get a really concise definition of what our ideal best fit target is, what makes us unique, how do we take care of our customers, so that's what the proven process is. So from the moment they express interest in the problem or your solution, how do you take them from that discovery discussion right through to close, and then maybe some sort of care and feeding. So that's what the proven process is. And then do you have a guarantee? There's a benefits company that I was actually in the session room with yesterday, that when I presented this guarantee scenario to them, at first they were a little bit wary, but I described to them that you need to have a guarantee that speeds up your sales cycle and takes away an objection that slows you down. And they came up with a guarantee. Guarantees are not for everyone, but they came up with a guarantee where if a company spends the time with them to explain to them what their benefits requirements are, and who their existing carrier is within the confidentiality capability that they're able to share, if they spend the time with them, their guarantee is that they will save them money and give them better coverage. And if they cannot do that, they will give them their time back. And the way they've equated the time value is a $10,000 check. And they feel so confident about this guarantee that they offer it in every single discovery scenario, and it's helping them close business. So that's what the guarantee is. And then 3 years is kind of where you want to be 3 years from now, and what do you need to be able to deliver on where you are 3 years from now. So that's just a one-page document. That one-page document, if you as a leader know this stuff verbatim, and if you share this information with your people, starting with core values, core focus, where we want to be 10 years from now, what does our ideal best fit customer look like? If you can do that, then you're halfway there from a leadership perspective, and being able to articulate what that vision is for your company. So let's summarize leading just for a second. If you take a look at your workbook, if you've got one, I just have a quick checklist that I want you to sort of think about, and this is for you to take back afterwards, first one is, am I giving clear direction? So am I creating a compelling vision for my people? And the way we do this within the EOS vernacular is through the VTO. Am I painting that picture? So you got to ask yourself, and if you've got 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 direct reports, remember, if you're 5 for 6, that's not good enough. You got to work on that 6th person. Number 2, you're providing the necessary tools, resources, training, technology, people, time and attention, one-on-ones, mentorship. Are you doing that for all your 6 people? Ask yourself that. Anyone that writes a no, just work on that. I'm letting go of the vine. So one of the biggest challenges leaders have, entrepreneurs, owners, is delegation. There's a story about a man of faith, an entrepreneur, man of faith falling off a cliff, falling to his death. He grabs onto a vine, was able to save himself. Vine appeared out of nowhere. And as he's hanging onto the vine, this sort of heavenly voice comes from above. And the voice says, "Do you believe?" And the entrepreneur looks up and he says, "Yeah, I believe." And then the voice says, "Let go of the vine." And then the entrepreneur looks up and he says, "Is there anyone else up there?" Right? And so the challenge that entrepreneurs, that leaders, that people that got into the leadership position is they got there by doing. And so now it's time to let go. And we have this thing, it's called the Delegate and Elevate. It's not in your workbooks, but this is a really simple tool, or with clients on, where I ask them to write down everything they do over a 2-week period. And everything from picking up the phone, to answering tenders, to managing projects, everything. And then categorize them into areas of stuff that you don't like doing and you're not good at, stuff that you don't like doing but you're good at, stuff that you love and you're great at, stuff that you like you're good at. So put them in these 4 categories. And then you work your way through this, and ultimately, if you got enough critical mass within your organization, you're residing up here in this top left corner. You want to be doing things that give you energy that you're great at. The biggest challenge, by the way, is stuff that you don't like doing, but you're good at. That's the stuff that's the most hard to let go. And the reason for that is it'll take longer to explain it to someone to get it done yourself, right? And so that is a big part of leading. Letting go of the vine. I act with the greater good in mind. So everything I do, everything we do is for the greater good of the company, okay? And I've got to be walking the talk, company needs first, and then you're taking clarity breaks. So it's just a quick checklist on the leadership front. And with that, we'll get on to management. So management. Management is the administration and coordination of organizational activities, resources, and people to achieve specific goals efficiently. So you can be the best leader in the world. Actually, I think I've got a quote on this. Vision without execution is hallucination. So you need to be able to do both. And in order to do that, what you got to do is you got to make sure that your people know what's important. And we have this concept, they're called rocks. I just want to walk you through this real quickly. So here's the philosophy of rocks. If I take a look at that vase represents time. I've got rocks, I've got sand, I've got water, and I've got pebbles. So in a personal metaphor, so the rocks are your faith, your family, and your health. Not necessarily in that order, but those are the most important things for you as a person, right? Then your pebbles would be your job, the memberships that you have that you really value, the volunteer organizations that you contribute to. These are important to you, but not quite as important as your faith, your family, and health. Sand is kind of your car, everything else, like all the fun little things, going out for dinner, whatnot. And then water, or H2O, is scrolling, like just wasting your time, but it's fun, right? So from a personal perspective, those are the sort of four comparisons. If you were to fill that vase with water first, then sand, then the pebbles, then the rocks, you wouldn't have room for all the rocks. If you start with the rocks and then work your way backwards, you'll have enough room for scrolling, but not that much, right? So that's the philosophy, that's the idea. So you as a leader, as a manager, you need to be able to identify what the most important things are for the next 60 to 90 days, for the next year, and you got to work with your people to help them identify that as well. And when you do that, capture it. Start thinking about what are our targets for the year, what are our goals for the year, and then what are our targets and what are our goals for the next 90 days. And when we write rocks, we call them SMART rocks, so specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound rocks about priorities, and we've got agreement around the table on what's really important, then we're able to execute and be able to move the sticks for the company. Less is more. You can't have a million different priorities. What are the top 3 to 5 priorities? And then you've also got to have a little bit of data that you're working on, that you're looking at. This is just kind of the heartbeat or the pulse of the business. So if you're working with a small team, what are the engine light type data things that we need to look at on a weekly basis? An engine light is the sort of metaphor. If you think about a car, there's so many things going on in your car, a million different moving parts. Really, all you're looking at is your speed gauge, your gas gauge, and if the engine light's going off or the oil light's going off, you're pulling over the side of the road. So within a small business, within project management, if I've got 3 projects that I'm working on, what is my red engine light? What are the things that if this thing's off track or that thing's off track, I'm getting back to business, right? And so everyone should have 2 or 3 or 4 different little scorecard items that they look at on a weekly basis. When I'm facilitating this with companies, what I ask them to think about is just the idea of, you've got 5 weeks of vacation accrued. So you run a function within a business, you've got 5 weeks of vacation accrued, you've talked to your spouse, and you're gonna take a 5-week vacation consecutive, and your boss has indicated that they'll support that, as long as the wheels don't fall off the bus, right, of the function that you're accountable for. And so if you're on your 5-week vacation, at the end of every week, someone comes into your hotel room with 3 numbers on a sheet of paper, just 3 numbers, and you can tell your spouse whether or not we can continue on to week 2 or week 3 or week 4 or week 5 just based on those 3 numbers. It's a tough exercise to be able to identify what those numbers are, but if you can, it's very, very powerful. Now, let's talk about keeping the circles connected. So many organizations, too many meetings, there's meetings that could have been emails, but the reality is you do need to communicate. And if you've got a small team, you do need to communicate. And if you can communicate really effectively and get a lot of stuff across in a relatively short period of time, that should eliminate other stand-ups. It should eliminate ops meetings that maybe didn't need to happen, et cetera. And so we teach something called the Level 10 meeting, and this is how I was introduced to EOS, and I just want to share it with you. So if you're managing a small team, first of all, we all agree that we don't mess with this meeting. This meeting is consistent, it's regular, same day, same time, every week. Sometimes it's an off business day, off hour. It starts on time and it ends on time. So we start off with good news. Everyone shares a little bit of good news, personal and business, 5 minutes. Then we have a scorecard. So that's the metrics that I talked about just recently, right? What are the engine lights? Do we have any engine lights going off? No, everything's green. Great, less than 5 minutes. But if we have 1 or 2 things, like from a sales perspective, an example would be And I want your engine light to be a leading indicator, not a trailing indicator. A leading indicator would be the number of conversations or the number of proposals that I've sent out the door, as opposed to what I sold last week, right? So if my threshold, if my weekly threshold is I need to send out 3 quotes a week, and my number is sitting at 2 or 1, and it's sitting at 2 or a 1 for 3 or 4 weeks in a row, I need you dropping that down to the issues list, but let's not talk about it now, let's just note that. So that's how it's less than 5 minutes. Rock reviews, so these are the 3 or 4 things that you said you were gonna get done in the next 60 to 90 days. It's either on track, off track, or complete. Customer and employee headlines, this is the stuff within your small team that you wanna share about a project worksite you were on last week, or a conversation that you had at the Sens game with a customer that's really happy or unhappy, like all that little kibitzing, right? 5 minutes, less than. Then we talk about our to-do list. To-do is everything that we said we were gonna do last week. Are we getting those things done? And that increases the level of accountability within your small team, because no one likes to be 0 for 4 on to-dos. And over a period of time, if you've got consistent to-do completion not getting done, it's one of 2 things. It's either they're being a little too aggressive in what they can get done in a 7-day period, or you do have an accountability issue and it'll be staring you right in the face and you gotta address that with your person. And then the next 60 minutes within the level 10 meeting is problem solving, it's IDSing. So you've got 5 or 6 or 10 issues, and what you wanna do is you wanna prioritize what the most important issues are, get them to the top of the list, and then solve for the root cause. So if we missed our number last quarter and that's an issue, what we've got to do is we've got to take a look at that issue and we've got to solve for the root cause. Was it a sales issue? Was it a pricing issue? Was it a customer service issue? What are the potential root causes of why we missed our number? And then let's attack that. Maybe it's marketing. Who knows? Maybe it's multiple. But that's what IDSing is. And then everyone wraps up at the end with conclusion, and we all rate the meeting on a scale of 1 to 10. And over a period of time, your scores should increase. Every now and then you'll go backwards. But if you give the meeting a 6, you've got to give me a reason why, and then ideally that's a self-correcting mechanism over a period of time where you don't repeat the same errors. Accountability chart, real quick, I want to talk to you about this. It's just the idea that you as an organization, if you're at the top level of an organization, think of the owner's box hovering above this, okay? But you've got to identify what your major functions are. Now within construction, marketing and sales, okay, maybe we'll call that BD, right, or estimating. Operations might look like 2 or 3 of your different major units, like demolition, environmental, whatever your different units are. Maybe it's a geographic scenario. And then finance, usually pretty consistent, but sometimes HR and IT is in there. So what are the major functions for the organization? Do we have a visionary leader? Most entrepreneurially led organizations do. Visionary leaders are usually the founder, but not always. This is our CEO. They're always moving forward, but never in a straight line. They're kind of a little business ADD, but they are very dynamic, great at the big conversations, very passionate about culture. So I just like to sort of identify whether or not we have a visionary in the room. And then I want that visionary to get to understand or appreciate the fact that they're probably not really well wired to keep the trains running on time. It's usually not in their DNA. So do we have an integrator? The integrator is often maybe the president, the COO, the general manager, but they need that complement, right? So that's the accountability chart. And then where I'm going with this is we've got to identify the roles and responsibilities for each major function. And then the people, if you're managing your people, this is the difference between leadership and management. If you're managing your people, you've got to assess whether or not they get it, whether they want it, or they're capable. And they need to be able to do all 3. And so GWC, capacity has to do with experience, education, time. Wants it, self-explanatory, but maybe they're projecting that they don't want to do a job, but maybe you can address that. And then gets it's a little tougher to address, but they need to GWC all 3. And so when you're managing your people, this is the people analyzer again coming back at you. So you want them to be a good cultural fit for your organization, and you want to be able to clearly identify if there are any GWC issues. So here we have a superstar, Sarah. She's a great cultural fit for your organization. She gets it, she wants it, but she's just not getting it done, whatever she's doing for your business. And so you've got to address that. And there's really two kinds of people issues when you're leading your folks, right? So you got the right person in the wrong seat. So that is the individual that is a great cultural fit for your organization, but they're just not getting it done. And in that scenario, if you're a for-profit organization, you may need to move away from that individual, but not before you give them every chance that you can provide them with the time limit that you have and your finite resources. Maybe you can put them somewhere else in your organization. They're a great cultural fit. Put them somewhere else in your organization, and they could really be executing well. But ultimately, that's something that you want to address. And then wrong person, right seat. This one's a little tougher to deal with, right? So you got someone that is executing really well. They get the job done. They've got experience. They've got education. They're really good at doing whatever it is that they do. But in your heart of hearts, culturally, they're not a great fit. Sales example I always like to give here is my top rep, who I knew the moment the door was closed was speaking ill of the company or the product or not sharing leads. In those scenarios, you've got to have that conversation. You can't tolerate it because they're killing you in the back room. And if you're a for-profit organization, if you're a good leader, if you're a good manager, you ultimately may need to move away from that individual as well. So going back to the checklist. So difference between leadership and management. So I keep expectations clear. So that's what the accountability chart's all about. It's the roles and responsibilities. And we've got rocks that we agree upon at the beginning of every quarter, and we're tracking those rocks. So I'm keeping expectations clear. I'm communicating well. So I've got a great weekly pulse. I've got a great quarterly pulse. I'm getting together with them one-on-one. I have the right meeting pulse. I'm having quarterly conversations. So I'm having a quarterly debrief with them on core values, on roles and responsibilities, and what their rocks are. Usually those quarterly conversations, we highly recommend those are informal. It's not a formal performance review, because a performance review has this sort of expectation. At the end of that performance review, there's some sort of action or raise or whatever, promotion. Whereas if you just have good quarterly informal cadence complemented with an annual performance review, you'd be able to get that conversation about maybe a core value misalignment done in a manner that doesn't necessarily need to be documented right away, but you kind of nip it in the bud. And then you're rewarding and recognizing. So you give positive and negative feedback quickly, 24 hours, criticize in private, praise in public. When we're doing core value speeches, CEOs that I work with, when they talk about the core values, I like them to sort of paint a picture of what, let's say, humbly confident looks like, right? Give an example of someone on the team that has exhibited that core value. Give an example of what the reverse of that core value is, but don't name that name, because that's in a public kind of forum, but then go have that conversation one-on-one with that individual later on. Okay, so let me just move on to this. See if it's going to move forward here for me. Okay. So you're going to notice here, I've got a white slide. The picture didn't come through properly, but kind of wanted to tell you a story about my dad, who wrote this book, who's in the military. In this particular picture, which you can't see, he was 21 years old, and he was a fighter pilot in Europe, in France, flying the CF-104 Starfighter. It's a really cool hero picture of him, where he's sitting in his cockpit. This is a jet that went Mach 2, and he was a recce pilot, so he would have to go down 50 feet off the ground in the Cold War in 1965, 66, and he would have to take pictures of enemy tanks crossing the river if the Russians attacked. And then he would have to go up and transmit the pictures back to base. And if World War III did start, I asked him where he would land, and he said, well, no, our bases would be gone, so we just have to fly around till we ran out of gas and hopefully bail out over someplace that wasn't nuclear. And so this picture, which is really cool, he was the right person in the right seat at that point in time. 2 years later, he would climb into his cockpit. This particular jet was called the Widowmaker. Killed a lot of pilots in Canada. And he would have anxiety attacks. And he got to the point where he would actually go out on exercise and he would just fly around in the practice area, but he wouldn't do any of the sort of, drills that they were supposed to do. So he found himself as the right person in that he believed in Canada, he believed in the military, loved the military, but in the wrong seat. And so the story that I wanted to tell you here is after he confessed to his flight surgeon, they ended up getting him into something known as air traffic control. So he was a 21 or 22-year-old fighter pilot. By the time he was about 30, he had lost his nerve flying. But he loved the military. So they remustered him to air traffic control, and he ended up being the only air traffic control officer up in the tower that had pilot's wings that had flown Mach 2 fighters. And the fighter pilots loved him because he was able to understand kind of where they were in a tough circuit or a tough landing type situation. So that's one thing I wanted to sort of bring across. And so he remustered. He was the right person in the right seat. Then he went right person, wrong seat. Then he ended up becoming right person, right seat. And then ultimately, he ended up retiring. And that's him on parade. He was the base commander at CFB Borden. And this is him today. He's having a lot of fun. So the point that I wanted to make, if I would have had that cool picture, is you can be the right person in the right seat at a certain point in your career. But you may need to change at some point. You may need to leave the organization. You may need to remuster to another position within your organization. And you as a leader and as a manager should be able to recognize that as well. And so that is the main point that I wanted to make with that story. And so just a recap on LMA. Leadership is on the business. It's creating that vision. It's reinforcing that vision. The power of 7, your people need to hear it 7 times. Even though it's super clear in your head, you got to repeat it to them. And then management is in the business, creating expectations, setting expectations. And the 3 takeaways I want you to have here today: leadership and management are different, but they're both critical. Cultural misalignment is one thing. Execution is another. They both need to be addressed and deal with either methodically and without delay. Now, I do get asked, I'm just wrapping up here, I do get asked for young leaders or for leaders and managers here that have young leaders, do I do one-on-one executive coaching or is there leadership development? No, I just facilitate EOS to leadership teams, and there's elements of LMA in what I teach. But I wanted to call to your attention that there are some fantastic resources out there for you. There's Ottawa Young Construction Leaders, as you're probably all familiar. There's some great companies I'm very familiar with as well. Gasparotto Group, that's a former military combat engineer, Afghanistan combat veteran. He does team building. He does one-on-one leadership development. And then I'm sure you're familiar with Westreach as well. They're here at the show. They've got a booth. So if any of that is something that you want to pursue, I highly recommend those types of areas. And then we've got some resources, some books that I highly recommend. One is called How to Be a Great Boss, which is a primer for a young leader. We've got Maxwell's 5 Levels of Leadership. This is my last copy, and it's well thumbed. Unfortunately, I won't be able to give this one away. I've got a book on people. I've got a couple of copies of books on people. And then, of course, I've got my dad's books, because when he's fully retired, he gave me 3 cases of them. So I've got a couple of these books left. And if anyone is interested in any of these books, this one here would be the most topical. And I'll just ask a question here. See if any of you were paying attention. What does LMA not stand for? Okay, who was first there? All right. Would you like the book? Is that you? Oh. Oh, would you like the book? Is there anyone, and I won't necessarily do, because we're running low on time, I won't necessarily do a little contest for any of these, but I've got a couple of books here for traction, and then I've got a couple of books on people, and I've got a couple of books on leading managers, if anyone wants to approach me afterwards. The other thing that I want to mention is I am going to be doing a workshop on EOS next week, next Thursday, at my office in Bell's Corners. It's a small audience workshop. I've got a couple of spots left. And if anyone has any questions afterwards, I'm very reachable through the OCA. OCA has been fantastic to me and vice versa, I would like to think. Yeah, love working with construction companies. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott, for the wonderful presentation today. On behalf of OCA and the speaker gift sponsors, Soloway Wright LLP and Beacon Light, please accept this gift as a token
Thank
of
you.
appreciation.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much, Scott.
My pleasure.